My name is Alina Vance, and I am the woman who was told to stay in the shadows so a greater man could shine. For 5 years, I was the silent engine behind a high-powered machine named Julian. I was the one who edited his speeches, the one who fact-checked his data, and the one who made sure his shirts were pressed to a crisp, military perfection. I thought we were a team. I thought we were building a life. But 3 days ago, standing in the marble foyer of a 5-star hotel, Julian looked at me with a coldness that froze my blood. He adjusted my vintage necklace, leaned in close, and whispered, "Try not to embarrass me tonight, Alina. These people are way above your level. Just nod, smile, and stay near the bar. In the next 20 minutes, you're going to hear exactly how I took that low-level status and used it to dismantle a $5 million empire in a single evening. You'll hear how a woman who was treated like background noise became the loudest sound in the room. This isn't just a story about a breakup. It's a manual on why you should never underestimate the person who knows where all your bodies are buried. Before we get into the night the world fell apart for Julian, hit that like button and subscribe. If you've ever been made to feel small by someone you loved, this one is for you. Let's get into it. Julian and I met when he was nothing but a junior consultant with a fast tongue and a cheap suit. I was a researcher for a private equity firm, the kind of person who spends 10 hours a day looking at spreadsheets until the numbers start to tell a story. When we started dating, I saw potential. I saw a man who had the charisma I lacked, and I decided to pour everything I had into him. For 5 years, our relationship followed a strict pattern. Julian was the face, I was the brain. He would come home with a messy idea for a presentation, and I would stay up until 3:00 a.m. turning it into a masterpiece. He would win the Employee of the Year award, and I would be the one who wrote the acceptance speech he read off the teleprompter. We lived in a beautiful house in the suburbs of Chicago. From the outside, it was perfect. Manicured lawn, a silver SUV in the driveway, and a wedding date set for next summer. But inside, the air was thin. Julian had started to believe his own hype. He truly thought he was the genius he pretended to be in boardrooms. He started calling my job cute. He started telling me that my social skills were lacking and that I should let him handle the real people. The night of the Founders Gala was supposed to be his big moment. He was being scouted for a CEO position at a rival firm, a job that came with a massive signing bonus and global prestige. As I got ready, picking out a simple but elegant black dress, Julian walked into the bedroom. He didn't compliment me. He didn't look at me with love. He looked at me like a landlord inspecting a property that was slightly below code. "That dress is fine," he said, checking his gold watch. "Just remember what I said. The people tonight, the investors, the board members, they speak a different language. Don't try to chime in on the tech talk. You'll just make us both look bad. Just stay quiet and look pretty." My heart hammered against my ribs. It was a physical pain, like a dull knife scraping against my sternum. I felt the heat rise to my cheeks, but I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just nodded. "I understand, Julian," I said softly. He patted my cheek, a gesture so patronizing it made my skin crawl. "Good girl, let's go make some history." We drove to the hotel in silence. Julian practiced his pitch under his breath, his voice full of an arrogance that made me feel sick. I sat in the passenger seat, clutching my small clutch bag. Inside that bag wasn't just lipstick and a phone. Inside was a small USB drive I had taken from Julian's office that morning. It contained the real history of his latest project, the one that proved he hadn't actually closed the deals he was claiming. He had padded the numbers. He had lied to the board, and I was the only person in the world who knew. As the valet opened the door, Julian gave me one last look of warning. I stepped out onto the red carpet, the flashbulbs blinding me. He reached for my hand, posing for the cameras, a perfect smile plastered on his face. I smiled back, but behind my teeth I was counting down the minutes. The ballroom was a sea of black ties and silk gowns. The scent of expensive perfume and aged bourbon filled the air. Julian immediately pivoted toward the heavy hitters, men in their 60s with white hair and eyes like sharks. I followed half a step behind him, exactly as I had been trained. "This is Alina," Julian would say, barely glancing at me as he introduced me to a billionaire. "She works in logistics, very detail-oriented, keeps our home running like a clock." He made me sound like a housekeeper. One man, a tech mogul named Arthur, looked at me with a flicker of genuine interest. "Logistics? We're looking for a new head of operations. It's a complex field." Before I could open my mouth, Julian laughed, a loud, booming sound that signaled he was taking control. Oh, Alina just handles the basic stuff, Arthur. She's not really into the high-level strategy. Now let's talk about that merger I was telling you about. I stood there, my glass of sparkling water shaking slightly in my hand. I looked around the room. I saw dozens of women like me, smart, capable women who were being used as accessories by men who thought they were kings. I felt a wave of nausea. I had spent 5 years being the background noise Eliza talked about. I had allowed Julian to erase my identity so he could draw a bigger version of his own. The injustice of it felt like a weight on my shoulders, a physical pressure that made it hard to breathe. I thought about the 3:00 a.m. sessions. I thought about the time I had the flu and still finished his quarterly report while he slept soundly. I thought about my own career, which I had stalled so he could move faster. Julian moved to the center of the room to prepare for his keynote speech. He was glowing. He was the main song. I watched him walk toward the stage, and I realized that if he got this CEO job, I would be trapped forever. I would be the wife of a powerful man, a woman whose only job was to not embarrass him. I walked toward the back of the room, where the tech crew was managing the giant screens. I knew the lead technician, a young guy named Leo who I had helped with a spreadsheet issue during the rehearsal. "Hey, Leo," I said, leaning over his shoulder. "Hey, Alina, Julian's up next. Are you ready to watch him kill it?" Leo asked, his eyes on the monitors. "Actually, Leo, there's a small change to the presentation," I said, my voice steady. "Julian wanted to add a last-minute slide for the investors, a transparency slide. He asked me to bring it over because he forgot it on his work drive." I pulled the USB drive from my bag. My pulse was racing so fast I thought I might faint. This was the point of no return. "He didn't mention it to me," Leo said, frowning. "You know how he is," I said, giving a small, knowing laugh. "He wants it to be a surprise, a big mic drop moment at the end of the speech. He'll be furious if it's not there." Leo looked at Julian on the stage, then back at me. Julian had been rude to Leo earlier that day. I could see Leo making a choice. "All right, I'll load it into the final slot, but if he gets mad, I'm telling him it was your idea." "Please do," I said. "I'll take the heat." I walked back into the crowd. Julian was already at the podium. He looked magnificent. He started his speech, and for the first 10 minutes, he was perfect. He spoke about growth, about integrity, and about the future of the industry. The audience was mesmerized. I stood near the bar, watching the man I thought I was going to marry lie to the world. And then he reached the end. "And finally," Julian said, his voice dropping into a dramatic, serious tone, "I want to talk about the numbers, the foundation of everything we've built. Because at the end of the day, a leader is only as good as the truth he stands on." He signaled for the final slide. The giant screen behind him flickered, but it wasn't the graph of projected growth he expected. Instead, it was a high-resolution scan of a private ledger, the one showing the $5 million deficit he had hidden through shell companies. Next to it was a series of emails, Julian's emails, where he explicitly told his accountant to make the numbers move until the audit was over. The room went silent. It was the kind of silence that feels like an explosion. Julian didn't see it at first. He was still looking at the audience, a smug smile on his face. But then he noticed the shift. He saw the investors' faces go from admiration to pure, frozen horror. Arthur the tech mogul stood up, his face turning a dark shade of purple. Julian turned around. He froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like a man who had walked off a cliff and only just realized there was no ground beneath him. He looked at the screen, then at the tech booth, and then his eyes scanned the room. He found me. I didn't hide. I didn't look away. I stood right in the center of the floor, holding my glass of water, and I gave him a small, polite nod. The same nod he told me to give. The chaos that followed was beautiful. Julian tried to keep speaking, but someone pulled his microphone. The board members rushed the stage. The shark-like investors were already on their phones, likely calling their lawyers. Security had to escort Julian off the stage because people were starting to shout. Julian pushed through the crowd, his face pale and sweating. He grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my skin. "What did you do? Alina, what did you do?" I pulled my arm away. I looked him directly in the eyes, the first time I had really looked at him as an equal in years. "I didn't do anything, Julian," I said, my voice loud enough for the people around us to hear. "I just followed your instructions. I stayed quiet. I stayed near the bar, and I didn't embarrass you. You did that all by yourself." "You ruined me," he hissed, his voice cracking. "That drive, that was in my private safe." "You really shouldn't use your birthday as your password, Julian," I said. "It's very low-level of you." I turned and walked out of the ballroom. I didn't wait for the valet. I didn't wait for him to apologize. I walked out into the cool night air of Chicago and started walking. I felt lighter than I had in a decade. The fallout was swifter than I expected. Julian didn't just lose the CEO job, he lost everything. The PR mask he had spent his life building shattered into a million pieces. Because the evidence was so public, displayed on a 40-foot screen in front of the city's elite, there was no spinning it. He tried to call me, of course. For 24 hours, my phone was a barrage of anger, then pleading, then sobbing. He told me we could fix it. He told me he loved me. He told me he was just under a lot of pressure. I didn't answer a single one. I went to our house while he was at a meeting with his lawyers and packed my things. I didn't take the silver SUV. I didn't take the expensive jewelry he bought me to make up for his insults. I took my books, my computer, and the vintage necklace that belonged to my grandmother. I moved into a small, messy apartment in a neighborhood Julian would have called beneath us. It had creaky floors and a view of a brick wall, but for the first time in 5 years, the air felt clean. 2 months later, I was sitting in a small cafe when someone tapped on my shoulder. It was Arthur, the tech mogul from the Gala. "Elena Vance," he said, pulling out a chair. "I've been looking for you." "I'm surprised you'd want to talk to anyone associated with Julian," I said, closing my laptop. Arthur laughed. "I'm a shark, Elena. I know the difference between a predator and the person who pulls the strings. I looked into that presentation. I looked into who actually wrote those quarterly reports for the last 5 years. It wasn't Julian." He pushed a business card across the table. "I don't need a pretty accessory for my firm. I need a head of operations who can spot a $5 million lie before it hits the books. Are you interested?" I looked at the card. It was a role that Julian would have killed for, a role he told me I wasn't level enough to understand. "I'm interested," I said, "but I have one condition." "What's that?" Arthur asked. "I don't stay in the background," I said, "and I never ever stay quiet." Julian is currently living in his parents' basement, waiting for his civil trials to conclude. He lost the house, the car, and the friends who only liked him for his status. Sometimes I see his name in industry newsletters, usually as a cautionary tale about ego and fraud. But me, I'm finally the main song. And let me tell you, the music sounds a lot better when you're the one writing the lyrics. If you've ever been told you're not on someone's level, remember this: the person on top only stays there because of the people holding them up. If they treat you like dirt, just move. And watch how fast they fall. Thank you for listening to my story. If you found this as satisfying as I did, leave a comment below with the word level so I know you made it to the end. And tell me, have you ever had to prove someone wrong in a big way? I'll be in the comments reading your stories. Until next time, stay loud.